Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So I've been telling the Patreon listeners that I've got these 2 Ether episodes in the can, and I haven't listened to them yet, but they are 4 months old. But like I always tell you guys, I'm always thinking about ether, ethereal sciences, and looking at the universe to see how it's all explained. This episode will be a redo of an episode I got in the can called Stupid Science. The way this episode is going to go is the following. I have thought of much easier ways to describe ether than probably any of the episodes, but it will be slight repeat of certain words and phrases from other episodes. But this is going to have some pictures if you're coming in through a podcast and you're interested, but I don't think you'll need them because I think the descriptions will make a lot of sense to you. The reason why we have to preface this entire episode with the review of ether is so that we understand why certain sciences are not correct, or they are manipulative, or they're trying to deceive you from understanding how the universe is put together, which does a couple things. It keeps you from discovering things that you would otherwise discover. It also keeps them, the authorities, because what if somebody told you reality was something that it wasn't? They're gaslighting your entire existence. Well, since it's not true, you will never have a grasp of where you are if you are allowing yourself to get your vision of the universe from somebody else. And sadly, that's a giant majority of the world. Sometimes it's out of sheer ignorance from just being in a part of the world that doesn't have education. Higher education, at least. But even for the highest first world nations, this stuff isn't allowed to be taught. And what's really fascinating about it is there are algorithms and entire divisions of science that work perfectly with the bad theories of why things are occurring, or at least the incomplete theories of how things work. Chemistry just works. You can't deny it. But I'm going to give you an analogy why chemistry works with a bogus theory of gravity and probably an incomplete theory of what they're actually dealing with on the atomic level. It doesn't really matter, though, because their entire science is at a higher level, and it simply works. So let's get started. What's really interesting is in all my research and all the books I've read and all the books I've listened to, which is probably a couple hundred in the area of atomic sciences, whether it be cosmology or subatomic physics, from Newton to special to general relativity to quantum physics to string theory, I've never heard what I'm about to tell you, but I've said it a couple times in other episodes. There is one book of physics for the entire universe. There is one book of physics. As it is above, so too it is below. The physics that run the entire universe are identical to the physics that you see every single day of your life. Now, the other thing I have to preface this with is that this is going to explain how the world could be a sphere, because I continually see these presentations by people who are charging money, and they draw that picture of the earth with people on the surface of the earth, and they try to make the audience feel stupid that they ever believe that. Now, I'm not into any Jesuit secret society. I don't want those people to be in power. But by God, if learning science the way it actually works is suddenly making you a demon, it's just like running after a person in Monty Python Quest for the Holy Grail and calling the hot chick a witch because she's not like the peasants, and burning her at the stake so that no one else knows that you're an idiot, right? Anyone who has studied the dynamics of fluids and the dynamics of gases understand that diffusion in the universe and all the properties of how these substances interact and how they move are virtually identical, only made distinct by the perhaps adhesive properties that say water has with water, air has with air, other gases, other liquids. But even an oil will turn into a little vortex and go down a drain. Water does the same thing. Does it at a higher velocity because of its difference in composition? If you just naturally let it do what it does, right? So we see all this physics on planet Earth, and we see pressure. We see the atmosphere push down on us. And supposedly, if the plane of existence is flat, everybody gets it who's a flat earther. The second that it turns into a circle/sphere, those people can't understand that. The globe people can't understand the flat theory. I'm going to put up 2 pictures, okay? And it is going to be fluid with bubbles in it. And then I'm going to put up space as we see the moon itself. Let's just use the moon. We all can see the moon. We can't see Earth. None of us, unless you're an astronaut, have been up high enough to ever see the Earth. So I get the skepticism, trust me. I know about Von Braun and his grave and the psalm that talks about the firmament, which in some translations does not say firmament. You know when you stare into a soda or a beer or a beverage that has a water bubble in it, or you're someplace else where there are bubbles underneath the water, not just floating on top. If we were to draw the diagram of what's making that happen, which I'm going to put on the screen, water is the substrate around the bubble. The bubble, in this particular case, is oxygen. It makes a sphere. It's a natural thing that happens, and it's right in front of your face constantly. Okay. Well, I'm sorry that the moon doesn't rotate in a way that we can see all sides of it, which allows other conspiracies about the moon to arrive. Now, the moon is a very weird thing. The moon is too big. The moon does keep a wild, weird orbit. It wobbles quite a bit, but it's out there. The sun is out there. College kids watch the sun rotate under these incredible lenses. You can go to the Griffith Observatory on any one particular day and look at the sun through these crazy telescopes that have got all filtered out. Spheres exist in space. But supposedly, in one theory of the universe, there's 2 books of science. And I don't care if you're a flat earther, then you think that, a sphere can't exist in space. If you're a globe earther, you think gravity is a phenomenon and that space is a vacuum. All that's wrong. I'm just going to tell you. We're on a sphere. Space is not water this time. It is the fundamental component that makes everything in the universe. It is not a vacuum. I got guys who've watched the show for 6 years turn up in my comments and go, "Hey man, the vacuum of space," and I got a whole episode on vacuums. Apparently didn't watch it. I've mentioned it a million times in shows. I had a NASA scientist tell me across the table, it's not a vacuum, that the ambient space around the sun is so volatile that you have to encapsulate any container with human beings in it with 6 inches of water in order to survive. Just ambient radiation from the sun, not a coronal mass ejection, not the Van Helmholtz. It's not a vacuum. But if I say, okay, how does this water keep the bubble going in the beer, right? Is it the same exact water particles touching that bubble to hold it into place? Even a little kid goes, no, man, the water is like kind of moving around the bubble constantly. It's constantly refreshing the bubble. I mean, the bubble's there and it just, it's got its difference with water. Oxygen gets to be on its own. Okay. Same thing with ether in space. Ether does not hold still around the Earth. In fact, the Earth is very permeable to ether, but for the most part, its plasma core interior keeps anything from really passing through it. Why is this all important? Because we're going to explain gravity one more time, because it kills a bunch of these theoreticals, out there. People generating $500,000 a year at universities, being tenured professors, having worked there 20, 30, 40 years, collecting money for junk science. Shows on TV like Cosmos, whatever. All kinds of specials all over the place. Teaching you crap science. Science fiction shows. From Star Trek to everything else. Thank God Star Wars doesn't get into it. For the most part. There is a word called phenomenon that if you see it, that is a blatant admission of deception for you to ever understand anything about what that subject matter is. We see pressure in the universe where we are on our planet all the time. A lack of pressure makes a wing fly in the sky. More pressure crushes something in the deepest depths of the ocean. Why does something go towards the bottom of the ocean? Well, it's strictly that you have so much stuff above you being pushed down that you start at 35 feet, you start getting pushed to the bottom of the ocean. I'm assuming that you keep going faster and faster and faster until you just get crushed by everything else that's down there. All the water's crushing in on you, right? But if you had something that the water couldn't penetrate, you'd be safe, right? So that's why we make submarines. Oxygenated, high-pressured containers that we can live in. We have to acclimate ourselves to the high pressure. It's going to get the bends inside this thing. But I assure you that if you were made out of a plasma energy, or you could put a kind of the Explorer movie plasma ball around you, it's perhaps transparent, but a big electromagnetic field around you, well, it's going to push on that orb, but it ain't going to push on you inside because you're going to be protected by this orb around you, right? Well, that's how baby planets start. That's how baby moons start. That's how baby suns start. You get this twirling ether in space. Again, repeat, for the person that's going to tell me that it's not a vacuum or that it is a vacuum, it's not a vacuum. The water in space is ether. Exact same book of science. And guess what, folks? It ain't even hard to understand. That's the funny thing. But ether's moving so fast that to us it looks transparent. To us, it doesn't seem like there's any ether right here between me and the camera. But I don't know how many infinite particles there are between me and the camera, or me and this mic. But I'm sure that the Googleplex number, which is what Google's named after, might be a high enough number to count the amount of ether particles between me and the mic, maybe. So when the collisions start to occur in ether, well, what happens to something when it starts to get into a fixed orbit around each other? And it's just a bunch of dudes bumping into each other. You've seen those dance halls in various countries where they have they all run in a circle. And apparently that dance, that Arab dance, is all about behaving like the solar system. They're paying homage to the way that the planets and the stars work as they run in that circle. It's been dubbed to a bunch of 50 Cent songs and a bunch of techno. It's pretty funny. But eventually, you get a slightly slower or maybe even tighter turn on this substance. It just depends on its configuration. And you get what we can now see, which is plasma energy. But as soon as you start moving out from the center of this thing, or out from the crust edge, I should say, you start building other higher construct things that we call atoms or quarks becoming atoms, right? You can call it whatever you want. Doesn't mean it's not there in its designation, which is why chemists do just fine in the world, why engineers do just fine in the world. For the sun, it's still moving extremely fast on the surface because it is so large that it's created this gigantic deprivation of energy, or deprivation of pressure in space. So here comes this ethereal energy, which is moving 50 times the speed of light. If you're about to bump into a giant bubble of the same thing that you are, you're an ethereal particle, no attribute. It's just your spin and your relationship with your brothers and sisters that make you something. You'll hit this surface, and guess what? They are the fundamental components of the universe. So fusion on the surface of the sun, making the most simple particles that exist, hydrogen and helium. Two also very flammable atoms. Why are they so flammable? Because they're so fundamental. Easy to make, easy to unravel. Easy come, easy go. The more complex an atom is, well, it takes a lot more to unravel it, doesn't it? You know what it's like when you build a Lego. If you just put two pieces together, well, it being knocked apart is only one move. But if you built this totally like brick masonry Rubik's Cube looking thing, well, you probably couldn't tear it apart with your hands. You'd have to throw it against the wall to break it, and maybe it'd stick in the wall because it'd still hold together. So the more complex the atom, the more orbits you have to disturb to get this thing to unravel, which is why the sun is 99% helium and hydrogen, and the other percent, it's like really 1.5% is divided up against everything else. There's even oxygen supposedly in the spectrum. It's just random. That's why it's there. The moon and Earth are so small, we don't have that capability of creating fusion on our surface, thank God. So we get stuff called soil, rock. Now, this doesn't negate by any means the human being created by a superior being, centralized consciousness, we might call God. This is just studying the fingerprints of where we are. Could this be a matrix? Absolutely, because there's still one giant unanswered question. The universe, if we use this little book of physics, which is the same everywhere, right? What happens to the smoke on the end of my stick? Well, if it didn't diffuse into the atmosphere, then the more I smoke, there'd just be this thicker and thicker opaque bubble around my head. And eventually, within a couple seconds, you wouldn't be able to see me ever again until I wipe it all away from my face. But it's diffusing, right? And if you took a little bit of chemistry or biology, it'll teach you about putting the food color in a glass, and a couple seconds later, yes, your eyes can barely register the tint compared to, depending on how much you put inside, right? So the universe has a bunch of stuff in it. No matter what model of the universe you want to adopt, you have to answer a question. There's really only a couple combinations that work. It's either infinite container and infinite stuff, which is really hard for the consciousness to accept. Or it's got a container. We don't know what that might be. We really don't. And it's got a finite amount of stuff in the center. Because the only other combination is infinite stuff, finite container. That doesn't make any sense. So we probably have some container. We don't really need to worry about that right now. But I developed an analogy to help people understand how they're able to work in sciences quite accurately and deny the existence of ether, but still have algorithms that work. Okay, so the old fable story was Galileo standing on the Tower of Pisa. He's got the two spheres, two balls. One's bigger than the other. Say one's a golf ball, one's a softball, made of steel. And he wanted to know if he dropped them at the same exact time, does the bigger one hit the ground first? No. Physicists actually say, the big one actually does hit slightly sooner, but to the naked eye, it hits at the same exact time. That makes sense in ether too. But we know this gravity thing exists, and the more we do tests, we can start developing terminal velocity algorithms, and they work. They absolutely work. So someone suggests what it is, and somebody says, great. It's mass pulling against mass, the phenomenon definition of gravity, which needs the word phenomenon in its definition because they can't prove it. And it makes no sense whatsoever. All right. So the Jesuits come in and say, man, you're not to talk about this kind of stuff. Only we know what gravity is, if they even knew what it was. But I'm making this up. But they come in there and they say, okay, everything has to be to the glory of God. Now, what they really want you to do is they say everything has to be a Marvel comic so that you never really understand the actual inner mechanism of the universe. But they're using God as a little cover mechanism. Because that's what they do. So they say, okay, we're going to show me your algorithms, all of them. Because they've now disseminated to the people. You're never going to erase that thing anymore. So they start changing the letters in the algorithm. Instead of F for force, it's now AP, angel power. And so what they do is they say everything that falls to the ground is falling according to units of angel power, keeping it in this realm of God and keeping you away from ever understanding what's actually causing it to occur. And it's this fundamental technology of keeping you aware of how things work so that you can build inventions for the psychopaths that run the world so they can benefit. The Boston Dynamics robots, they're going to end up telling us what to do. Technologies that are weapons, psychotronic weapons, HARP antennas, satellite technology, all kinds of weapons, rail guns, all this kind of stuff. They want you to understand electromagnetism. They want you to understand quantum locking. They just don't want you to really understand how this works. The more you understand ether, the more you look at all those technologies, and it makes 1,000% sense. In fact, it's not even complicated. The use of the chess rules can get complicated, right? Not that many rules to chess, but man, the games can get pretty intense, can't they? So that's always going to be a factor. There's brilliance one step past the rules. Now, the water around the bubble has a slightly different model, but it's the same mathematics. The water isn't moving 50 times the speed of light around that bubble. But our ether is doing that around all the bodies in space. When that occurs, you actually are talking about a tremendous amount of force. It's death by a billion, trillion, quadrillion needles to the power of a billion, quadrillion needles. So it's a ton of little tiny forces. The moon and Earth hold on to each other because they are blocking ethereal winds, because they both have these plasma ball cores. And the ether's trying to go through those balls, and it's bouncing off. It's like a dielectric wave at a macro level. So the backside of Earth to the face of the moon is getting pushed in one direction, but it's also getting pushed mainly to the sun, because the sun's a gigantic thing, creating a big negative space between, or negative pressure between the two. So it's getting sucked to the sun. The moon is closest to Earth, and Earth is dominating the moon's size by at least roughly about 7 times the size. A little bit less. So it's hanging on to us. But, they're telling us now the moon's going to just float away like Space 1999, which makes no sense at all unless that thing is truly something really, really elaborate and different than we think. I think Ed Harris is up there running the show. And we see this model on Earth all the time, don't we? What happens if you don't push a plane forward with an engine? Or you don't build it in a particular way where it can glide on the atmosphere? It's, gases are just liquids, but they're more distributed. Liquids or gases, just more concentrated. But the least compressed particle in the universe, in most cases, outside of an atom, is an ethereal particle. The entire concept of light coming to your eyes from across the entire universe and them telling you it's a vacuum is a joke. Everything needs a substrate, right? If light's to get to your eye, it's not a particle, man. It's a vibration of that ethereal substrate. And unless something stops it, it's going to get to your eye, which is why the entire sky isn't white. Because the more we push optics and we grab more of this infinitesimal light, we keep seeing stars and keep seeing stars. Just go out in the middle of the desert. You're not going to see but more than maybe 500 stars in your first minute opening your eyes. But if you lay out there for a while, you'll see about 1,200 stars in one hemisphere. Because your eyes are relaxing. Your rods and your cones are getting more sensitive. It's a fascinating thing that we acclimate to light, trust me. Just remember, a pirate patch had nothing to do with the dude missing an eye. A pirate patch was all about people hiding underneath the deck when they got mounted by pirates. And so before the patch technology, which was literally like infrared, they go down the deck and they get killed because they couldn't see anything. So the patch kept one eye acclimated to black. And they jumped down underneath to kill everybody, and they'd switch eyes, and automatically they could see underneath. It was just fucking brilliant, man. It's literally like OG infrared. So now let's go up to some theories of science that suck. I'm going to repeat it 1 billion times in episodes, but anything with phenomenon in its scientific definition means someone's bullshitting somebody. Let's go to the Big Bang. Once you understand what gravity is, you understand that the Big Bang cannot occur, because to compress anything in the universe takes an outside force of push, not pull. The entire universe would have to push on the entire universe. So you can't have both things. You can't have something on the outside choking your neck, but your neck's saying, hey, I'm doing this all by myself. I don't have hands, but you can see the hands, and you're like, but I'm everything in the universe, and it doesn't work. The Big Bang has never occurred. Has there been big explosions in space? Oh, probably. But remember, you can't compress down all the chemistry away to the point there's nothing that would ever explode. You get down to the point where, why would a neutron, if you compress something down to its singular component? I know these ideas of neutron stars and that kind of stuff, where you got a neutral atom and it's all compressed down inside this thing. Well, at some point, those atoms are going to give up their composition. They're going to turn into something completely more fundamental because they're getting broke apart by the outside pushing. But let's just give them their little theory. Let's just still say that their dumb Big Bang, which again was designed for housewives to tell their husbands how the universe started after they heard the report. I mean, the guys were just as gullible, I'm just saying. It's a singularity, supposedly, right? And all physics breaks down before this theory ever can occur. So the fact that they can't prove it on paper is hilarious, right? They're seconds behind making this thing occur. Plus, if you did compress everything into a singularity, as they have defined it with these ridiculous definitions of it doesn't have any mass. They just say that because it sounds interesting, man. They can't account for several seconds before this thing occurs, so they have no idea what their own theory comes up with. They just say magic happens, right? And believe me, I got some people in my family that say magic happens. The singularity, by definition, would be the single most fundamental thing to ever exist. Period. It's perfect. It is probably spherical, even by their definition. Being massless, again, is just a joke. But it has no bubbles inside of it, and it has no warts on the outside. It is perfect. So when that thing explodes, based on their ridiculous theory, the whole universe is unified, right? The top half of the universe looks like the bottom half of the universe. The right looks like the left. It's the most perfect firework ever made, and it accounts for the entire universe. Well, I don't know about you, but when I look at this sky at night, I don't see unification, do you? I don't see a pattern, do you? Well, that proves right away, even with their theory, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not the way they say it is. But then they have this theory about redshift and blue shift. Light. If anything is coming at you at the speed of light, or producing light, then the shift is going to be more blue. If something is going away from you, the shift is going to be red. And they were so happy they came up with this little theory. And then they looked at everything in space, and everything has a red shift. Oh, suddenly it looks like Earth is at the center of the universe. When presented to Stephen Hawking before he died, he said he had to come up with a theory, right? I'm sure other people were doing all of his work for him by that point. And he came up, they came up with this ridiculous theory that if you took a balloon, it's a perfect sphere, and you drew a bunch of dots on the outside of the balloon, and then you kept blowing it up, and you will put a camera on one of the dots, and you look around at the other dots, everything's moving away from itself. The most absurd thing you have ever heard in your life. People actually swallowed this. Why? Because they want to believe. They want to remain experts. I still know how the universe was created. The problem for this theory is that it's not three-dimensional. Sure, you got a three-dimensional sphere in their little theory that's expanding, but there would be infinite spheres inside that sphere and infinite spheres outside that sphere. And at some point, the ones down inside will be coming at you. Be all blue shifted, but that's not what we see, is it? This is crap science, man. And your kids are getting taught it every single day. All right, let's move over to black holes. So I studied black holes with a complete obsession from probably, 12 to 30. Wrote several little things on it. Wrote a 150-page report for my friend so she could get a good grade in school. But here's the theory of black holes. Because of their pull definition of gravity, they were able to theorize on a piece of paper that because of this pull, well, you get a bunch of stuff next to each other. It's going to pull. And then suddenly you're going to get something that's going to swallow light. Meaning light's trying to escape. But there's so much pull that even the vibrational waves of light get sucked back inside this thing. When light is not a particle, light is a wave. Light is the ripple in the pond when you throw a rock into the water. You can't physically go and grab it. It is a verbal reaction and not a noun. So right off the bat, capturing a verb with a noun is pretty funny. If black holes were to exist, then they would probably be the brightest thing in the sky, and they'd have some sort of electromagnetism inside that would hold, I guess, disrupt any ripple from trying to get out. But as they try to disrupt the ripple, they're creating more ripples on the outside, the event horizon idea. But here's the theory of how these things work. The sun is a mass 1 sun, an M1 sun. You have to start with the sun, this is their theory, of 4 to 12. Anything smaller than 4 is going to collapse in on itself and turn into a brown dwarf or some sort of non-black hole thing. Anything over 12 is going to collapse and explode, and it will never supposedly turn into this black hole thing because it's got too much energy in it bouncing off itself like this, right? Okay. So 4 to 12, you can make one, supposedly. The way you get giant black holes is you get 2 black holes that meet each other at a spaghetti dinner. You know, when they grab that one big piece of spaghetti and they start pulling it into their lips and they're like, they find each other. Black holes were gigantic science, and this is a way that the trend works, okay? Many of you have seen this trend in your lifetime. Science has come up with a new bullshit theory to sell humanity. They find a way to embed it in the colleges. The colleges love it because the overlords of the colleges, the psychopaths that run this world, the Royal Academy of Sciences, for instance, love to keep people deceived and like to make a lot of money and gain false status. Doesn't mean they're stupid. Quite the opposite, man. But they start pitching this thing. They make television shows. I mean, it's just literally a reason to make money and to deceive the population and to crap. Again, you only live a finite amount of years as a human being. So the more I can distract you with crap, I win if I'm a psychopath. Okay. But then people start analyzing the theory and they start going deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And again, by the late 80s, early 90s, even Stephen Hawking had written in one of his books that these things would probably dissipate. Even with the pull theory, they would turn into a disk, which was kind of pinched at the center. And at the center, it would create a vortex above and below and spit out probably like a really heavy helium. And they would dissipate. This technique brings everything in from the event horizon and it hits these 2 cones, north and south, and blows everything out and then it just vanishes. A bunch of other people came up with the same or similar theories. So by around 1992, if you read all the books that were published, you saw a bunch of the brainiacs go, yeah, these things don't exist. Even if they started to happen with pull technology, they would dissipate. But then what happens is, this is what happens with science. They go back and recook the theory. They're trying to make it work, then it's probably this, then probably this. This thing went away for a long time. I want to say about 10 years. You didn't hear much about it. Oh, sure, there's fossils teaching this crap in school. It gets them a paycheck, man. They don't care if they injure the minds of children. They never joined a real industry, so they're hiding in the academic institutions. Okay. Then it shows back up again around 2005. And what's the new theory? The new theory is that black holes are at the center of our galaxy and every other galaxy that's out there. This is a brilliant adjustment of the deception. Why? because you can't see it, even with their theory. The center of every galaxy picture you've ever seen, and that's one thing I've never seen through a telescope as a galaxy, is a bright center. It's draining like a drain, right? It's coming into a spherical orbit. That makes sense because it's the same thing that happens to every other fluid or gas in our world. Simply because you and I are made out of really stationary matter. This microphone, this camera, this tripod, everything's made out of very disciplined orbits. Well, I can melt everything that's here, including myself, you know. But now let's go back to this black hole theory. Very quickly in the black hole theory in the 70s, they realized that of all of the observable mass in the universe, because they're trying to tell you everything's a vacuum, where it's black. I mean, that's just knee-jerk reaction assumptions about the universe, right? They didn't have enough mass accounted for to create the Big Bang. So they went back to the drawing board. Back to the drawing board. Oh, I got it. It's called dark matter. It's just fictitious crap. When they needed to produce an image to show you what dark matter was, they simply pointed some telescopes at the universe, dialed in infrared light, another real high-frequency light that you can't see with your eyeballs, painted it as a big cloud wrapping around the Earth. There it is. And people just went gulp, 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 gulp. Man, I'm sure glad we got some smart people in the world. It's like a patch onto a bad theory. There's these absurd theories that if you leave the Earth's atmosphere, that you can't see any light because you need the Earth's atmosphere to see light. But your eyeballs are made of a liquid that can receive, obviously, okay, the verbal wave of light. Because there is a substrate of ether in the universe, you can see it right inside your eye. Now, there is a pending theory, which I'm not convinced about, because there are transverse waves and longitudinal waves. Big difference. The super duper slow wave is a transverse wave. And what's that, in case you don't know? Well, you've all seen transverse waves. You ever take a rope that's flat on the surface, or even your bed sheet? And what happens when you take the rope and you whip it, and you see that wave go all the way down? And it takes time to get to the end of that rope. You flip your bed sheets and you see that wave go to straighten out your sheets. Well, then you have a longitudinal wave. Longitudinal wave is only a wave in concept, but it's when you grab a dowel from a broomstick. And I hold one end and you hold the other end. You've done this one too. And you push on it, and your friend on the other side immediately feels the push back. That's an instantaneous wave of energy. So there is a debate as to whether or not the waves in the universe outside of the substrate of the atmosphere are either transverse or longitudinal. If that's the case, it still doesn't stop the idea that you're going to get light instantaneously or over time. If the universe is transmitting ripples just like the pond, and I think we have to assume that that's the way it is. It's probably transverse. Theories that we see starlight exactly when it happens is romantic, but that would mean that the universe is packed as tight as the fibers in wood that comprise the longitudinal example I just gave you. Well, that would remove any ability for anything to grow, anything to move through space. I do believe there are spaces in between ethereal particles. I believe that this show is being made possible by a bunch of ethereal particles creating magnetism, dielectric waves, which combine to make electrons, called electromagnetism. Now, there is another theory that has been sort of proven to be inaccurate at its absolute example, which is the speed of light. You were told that the speed of light is constant everywhere in the universe, but every university around the world has claimed slightly different speeds. Well, part of it is we are the ones that acknowledge time. We are the ones that acknowledge light because of our eyeballs and our brains and the way that it actually recognizes, well, basically ether bouncing off stuff and creating these waves. When you study the incandescent light bulb, you're studying basically the theory of fire. A filament inside of a vacuum, meaning less internal gas that will compete with the flame internally, making it burn more efficiently, also removes all the corrosion inside. It's basically burning. But now we have LEDs. LEDs are very, very interesting because they realized at certain pulse width modulations and electrical circuits controlling these things, that as the electrons move over this surface in a particular cadence, it is burping off of its surface the exact wave frequency that we recognize as light. Very, very useful. It's an amazing invention. Now, if ether moves 50 times the speed of light, as again Faraday, Tesla, and Eric Dollard have confirmed, and a bunch of people in between, but those are two, or I guess I could say two major sources that you can look up and believe. You have to get into Eric Dollard on the side because he's just a dude who just happened to be brilliant from the 70s up. It would seem like the ripples would be moving 50 times the speed of light, right? If some substrate's there. So we have to assume that the way that these waves work is very similar to like a domino. It's a transverse wave, not a longitudinal wave. If a domino setup was longitudinal, by the time you push the first domino, the last domino is moving exactly at the rate of the first one. That's not what we see. Set up a big domino exhibit, hit it. Takes sometimes hours for these things to finish. This is where you see a lot of particles working together to create a transverse system. That dictates for me that there's space in between ethereal particles. I got 2 episodes in the can. One talked a lot about just ether by itself, and one talked about as it applies to these sciences. To give you again a review. Any of you who have been in a crowd and you've been pushed around by people, you will know that if you're exiting a stadium, exiting some, Bourbon Street, downtown New Orleans, you can get pushed in direct correspondence between the path of least resistance, right? The buildings can't be pushed out of the way. So the human beings move down the artery of the street, the artery in all the corridors and paths, in a movie theater, in a big amphitheater. So we only move like a blood supply where we're allowed to move. Well, space is a big place, so it's going in all 3 dimensions. But even if we could stack ourselves up in all the dimensions in a cube and start moving, we'd be banging into each other. And eventually, you could constantly get hit in the right shoulder, and you'd always be making a left. You'd always be making a left. You'd always be making a left because you have to fight your way out to get outside of that little loop you're in. Well, imagine this in 3D. You're going in a spherical bumping loop. No matter where you are, you keep getting bumped into that sphere. That's how ether behaves to create spherical objects that then continue to make spherical objects. So you make, let's say, a 1 foot diameter collision of ether. Well, then that starts acting like its own particle. And there's another 1 foot one, and another 1 foot one, another 1 foot one. And they start banging into each other, and they start acting like the little ones that make them up. So it keeps compounding infinitely up. And that's where we start getting things like protons and neutrons. But there's always going to be a bunch of particles still trying to penetrate these things because they're just banging into them. They're coming in at some crazy dive bomber, kamikaze angle. When those things come in and hit that sphere and they bump on the other buddies that are in there really dense, they ricochet off. You've seen this a million times when you see things ricochet. Well, that's your dielectric wave bouncing off the center 2 components of an atom. The problem is there's another sphere forming on the outside. and it's moving in an orbit around those things because those little things have created a little deprivation and pressure, drawing in more because they're not equally hitting each other or passing each other at night. And so you get a sphere. That's your magnetism wave. When that ricocheting particle bumps into that spherical moving particles, it causes a spin. And that particular spin is always designated as a negative charged electron. That's why your physics teacher was always like, hey, it's not really a particle around the outside, even though we draw it that way, it's more like a cloud around the outside. Well, once you understand that little model, you understand electricity big time. The reason why magnets draw to each other when you put them in one polarity, and the reason why they push away from each other in another polarity, is that a magnet, again, like I said in a recent episode, it has all of its electrons aligned. So all the paths are moving in the same direction around the magnet. Well, when you put them positive to positive or negative to negative, you get them aligned, that's when they push away from each other, because these two fields, it's basically like a bunch of people running around that thing. Well, when they start running against each other, they're going to push away. When they start moving together, boom, they start slamming together. Opposites attract, right? Like forces repel. Another easy way to understand that is the Formula tires from an F1 race. Two tires touching each other, moving the same exact direction, cause what to happen? Well, one of them's going to go flying in the air, and one of them's going to get driven into the ground, most likely, right? But if for some reason the front tires of the car hitting the back tires of the other car were moving in opposite directions, well, they would get along like sprockets inside of a Swiss watch. So let's switch over to something that's not physics-based. Well, it's physics-based, but it's not something we talk about in that realm, because we're being manipulated by it quite a bit. It's this notion that the pop culture conversation that we've always used, as my writing teacher says, if someone talks to you at a water cooler, what they're really telling you is, I like you. That's what the conversation's been about. But when you live in a little town, it's funny. It's just a collection of bitching and moaning. That's how people kind of find a way to talk to each other. What's brilliant about it, and I don't even know if it was designed psychologically, but it is psychologically reinforced, which is this idea that the weather around the world, all of a sudden, is supposed to be perfect for everybody. No longer are deserts supposed to hit 130 degrees. No longer is this supposed to be snowy and cold in areas where you want to live. As long as you want to live there, the weather is supposed to be 72 degrees. It's never supposed to rain. It takes your bitching and moaning and turns it into a cause. The earth gets warm and gets cool because of really one thing. It's called the sun. I know that's a crazy, wacky theory, but stick with me here. The sun has things called sunspots. Sunspots are really sun holes in the surface of the sun. They're cyclical because all of that collision on the sun's surface is actually an algorithm. It's actually a pattern. It's still pretty chaotic to the human mind, but to the sun, it's not. It will develop these whirlwinds. Now, if you've ever looked into your basin of your tub when it's draining, it's got about a ½ inch of water left, and right there by the drain, it eventually swirls in a way that you can see the drain without any water on it. It's amazing. If you ever played with that as a kid, you could actually pull your finger on it and it would come into the porcelain, and it's still spinning. Tornadoes have an eye of a tornado. A hurricane has an eye of a hurricane. There's no water, there's no wind. It's really quiet in the center. Well, that's a two-dimensional version, or a tubular version, a conical version of the three-dimensional sphere that's the center of the Earth, the moon, and the sun. But you're never going to have the dirt on the surface of the moon or Earth swirl. because it's not a gas. It's not an exploding hydrogen or helium. But on the sun, it's being pushed into the spherical form from that plasma core. They'll tell you, I think on Wikipedia, it does admit that it's a plasma core. But they want you to believe that nickel iron is the center of Earth, which is a joke because it loses all of its magnetism at 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit, as I always say. But every once in a while, there are these swirls on this sun's surface. The reason why they're black in a filter is you're looking into the bowels of the sun, which has got nothing. Why is it black and not lit? Because the other side of the inside of the Earth, the sun is on fire. It's because no light is getting through there because it's got a barrier of electricity. When sunspots happen, you get more CMEs, or coronal mass ejections. Well, that means we're getting a lot more heat from the sun because we get a lot more explosions just kind of wisping off the surface of the sun. Now, we don't get baked here on Earth because we have something called the Van Allen belts, which are all the escaping ethereal particles out of the North Pole that go into the South Pole. Thank God that that little principle exists, otherwise we wouldn't exist here. So in 2003, the sun had, I think, about 5 spots on it. And that's when a lot of this data came in that was then cannibalized in 2006, December, when Al Gore told you that Montecito would be underwater by 2010, of which between 2006 and 2010 he bought a home there, and he still lives there to this day, and he's not underwater, and it's approximately 15 years after that moment. Now, I have a whole episode on global warming, so I'm not going to go into it in great detail. But remember, it was sold to you as one vector, and that was heat only. And they realized that wasn't going to happen. So they changed its name to climate change to basically say that if you're ever upset with the weather, take your bitching and moaning and put it into this cause and start creating yourself another big problem called carbon taxation. Go see my episode on depopulation for the details of that. I'm not going to repeat it here. There's something called the greenhouse gas layer index. And it is every chemical that we've ever recognized as being the causality of heat on Earth. Over 99% of that index is one thing, and it ain't CO2. It's H2O. It's water. And you all know that this is the cause of heat in your local town, or especially if you've traveled outside of your local town. People in Houston know that when it's 88 degrees out and they have this crazy 75% humidity and it's not raining outside, that water is sticking to them and it's holding the vibration of the heat of the day. So 88 degrees in Houston is like the equivalent of 110 in Havasu Lake. Where it's really dry, 88 feels beautiful. Like today, it got to 85 here where I live. Oh man, there was a breeze. It was beautiful. Being in the shadow was just perfect. But if it was in Houston in 88, I would not be outside eating tacos. It'd be muggy and gross, and it just makes you tired because it eats up your body. Your body thinks it's being attacked. It creates literally a physical fever in your system, unrelated to any infection you might have. You have to go inside. You have to cool down just to get your thoughts back. The amount of CO2 in the greenhouse gas layer index is 540th% of a single percent. Take a penny, chop it in 540 pieces evenly. That one sliver of a penny or a pea or whatever your tiniest 1% equivalent of a dollar in your country is, that's the percentage of all the CO2 from the oceans, cow farts, volcanoes, and then man is about 1.5% on a really bad day of that 540th% of a single percent. Source, head meteorologist professor at MIT. Sorry, guys. This is nothing more than a bad habit of humanity turning into a theory to make sure that you can't afford to have babies. Again, go see my episode on global warming if you have any questions. So there is a cascade of ridiculous theories that are going out there. And I'm going to give you the foundation of this because it's extremely important for any of you that are tired of these ridiculous theories causing panic in your family and your friends and the world community at large. So here's how it worked. Once they realized, meaning created, this bed of scientists that will sell out their own kind for a paycheck, they knew they had ultimate power over the consciousness of man. And I will tell you that climate change scientists proved that every other scientist could be bought off in seconds. Now, there are some great people out there, and you know them. You'll have a different collection of scientists that are telling the truth, and it's different than your neighbor. So there are some heroes out there, but they're a tiny little drop in the ocean, unfortunately. So they launched this platform. The platform's made out of shilly people who are pissed off and jealous of everybody that didn't stick into, I was going to say a mental institution, a teaching institution. Think about it. You study how to write screenplays, but you never written one. You study how to write screenplays, but you never sold one. You study race car driving, but you never raced a car. You're obviously jealous of the people that are winning all the races, that are writing all the music that people buy, but you're teaching musical theory in school. Now, there's some schools that are made out of the professionals, and those are the best schools to go to in the world, right? It's the way it used to be. You were an apprentice to a master, and then you became the master. So it's easy to co-opt these people. They just want their pension, retire. Honestly, they have one of the most secure jobs in the world, but they don't get paid what they're worth, usually, even if they're really good. So I'll give you a few. The agricultural system of this world is under attack. Jeremy Clarkson just made a special on, I believe, Amazon, which is Clarkson's Farm, whatever. It's hilarious. It's fantastic. It's heartfelt. He does an amazing job. I give the show a 9.5, man. But he has to kind of regurgitate a bunch of this stuff because, he may actually believe it. I mean, he's of that generation that trusted a lot of things, but I think he's also a critical thinker. So it might be just to keep the show funded, and you do get surrounded by producers that tell you what to say to get your money for your show. Well, you do that show, but we need you to promote climate change. You need you to promote, all this other stuff. But they're trying to tell England, for instance, they're going to go back into a dust bowl where they have over-harvested their land to the point it's going to lose its ability to grow. And then when you have fields all over Great Britain that don't have anything growing on them, then it's just dust. And then it allows all kinds of crazy things to happen. Just see the America during the Dust Bowl era where we didn't understand agriculture. Today, we know how to rotate crops. We know how to plant crops and kill them without harvesting them so that dies inside the soil, alkalines, or I should say its acidity of the soil, is at -6 and everything grows. As it goes more alkaline to 0, nothing grows in it. So we know how to service the land at this point. To hatch this theory in England and all around the world that we're going to make the mistakes we made in the 30s is a ludicrous notion. But they're trying to reduce food production in the world because of these ridiculous theories, because they're trying to depopulate this place. I've had people sit on this porch and tell me that all the natural spring water is going to disappear in the world, that we only have a finite amount of fresh water in the world. Unbelievable that anybody would utter those words. And you ask them, well, where does fresh water come from? And they think it's magic. It just boils out of the ground or something, right? Where does fresh water come from, people? Well, it's called evaporation, and then it turns into clouds, and then it rains on the continents. And since the world is probably at least 2/3 ocean, the continents are going to constantly be rained on. Now, of course, if you're in Southern California saying this ridiculous crap, they understand because it rains about, maybe 24 days in the entire year. But go ask Seattle, go ask Oregon, go ask tropical this and tropical that. It doesn't matter if there's a jungle down below. The clouds still do what they do based on the shape of the earth and where it's going to create natural negative pressures such that the rain can fall out of the cloud. as well as coastal regions that bring in those clouds because they're next to the ocean. Go ask anybody in the Midwest if it's going to stop raining anytime soon. I think most of you know that the natural, these bottled water companies that bottle water have been now categorically identified as the number one reason why states have droughts. It's not a lack of rain, okay? It's that the reservoirs that were perfectly developed to handle the population, even though it is growing, are being sucked dry by these plastic bottle companies to sell it to you. It's just tap water in most cases, right? There's only one difference. Virtually all of the tap water companies put fluoride in the water to make sure that your pineal gland rots. It's hard to get away from fluoride because it's in all the restaurants too, because they use tap water to make iced tea or whatever. We're not running out of fresh water. Yes, climate's going to go through its cyclical stages. You're going to have mini ice ages. You're going to have heat waves. CO2 levels are going to fluctuate. Plants are going to eat it up, and plants are going to create oxygen. In the city area where I live, as man, builds concrete jungles everywhere, there's an interesting phase that's happened, and you tell me about your area of the world if you live in a city. When they built these cities, we had lots of trees of some sort. And they built around the trees. They took out trees for streets, and they took out trees to build a home or a building or whatever. But where they could, they left the trees there. But then the trees were a species that had something called roots. And the roots weren't completely friendly with sidewalks, with streets, with buildings that they're next to. And so we're not about to get rid of our society for a tree. So they take the tree down, which are usually gigantic trees that produce what? A tremendous amount of oxygen. Suck a tremendous amount of the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And they've been planting these little anemic trees. They just have like a tiny little blossom at the top. In terms of the ratio of leaves and photosynthesis, it's down at least 2/3, if not 80%. So we are sort of our own worst enemy in the midst of all this stuff. You keep hearing about these countries claiming to plant 100 million trees. Britain was going to plant 120 million trees. Jeremy Clarkson said, who's going to plant those trees? Who's going to water them? Because you have to water the crap out of a tree. It sucks it up for the first couple of years, and then it sort of lives on its own for the most part. I personally have not seen the video proof that anyone has ever done it. Plenty of video claims to have done it. I dearly hope it's happening. But you never hear that as a part of the solution for supposedly this overwhelming amount of CO2. Now, in the field of crappy science, or stupid science, there really is a bedlam of categories that one could go after, right? I think you all know that the way that humanity creates electricity couldn't be more inefficient than what we have certainly picked. And we've been kind of tricked if you aren't for some of the greener solutions like solar panels and windmills, of which are two very inefficient ways to create electricity for a million reasons, okay? They don't produce that much electricity. They tear up you have to have a field set aside for a solar panel farm. You have to have certain terrainal things for windmills. Windmills kill birds. They blow up every once in a while. So what do we have? We've got coal burning, oil burning. We have nuclear power plants. But we are missing two in America, okay, that are free for the most part. The freest one we can build is a dam to create hydroelectric. Like I've said several times, a buddy of mine was an engineer for 42 years and dealt with power systems constantly. And he said the hydroelectric was banned in the United States around 1973. Wow, really? And we do build like incredibly high dams and that kind of stuff, but you don't have to build them that huge. It's the cleanest way to create energy. Water pushes a fin, which turns a turbine, which then you can use an AC motor capacitor on top, transformer, and it generates free electricity. Remember, Nikola Tesla's first power plant was Niagara Falls. Go see my episode of Nikola Tesla, episode 500. But the other one is one that even one of my super liberal friends in Hollywood is furious that they screwed it up. And it's called geothermal. Now, if you go look up geothermal today, you're looking at a flawed design, a strategically flawed design, meaning it was designed perfect by Caltech, supposedly in the 50s. This is what my friend told me, and he's a genius. And they needed to sabotage it. If you ever watch the movie Zeitgeist, he talks about the geothermal plants in that movie. It's a 4-part movie. His calculation in that movie that one geothermal plant properly built could generate 4,500 times the electricity required by the entire planet per day. One plant, if built properly. So what's the theory? Well, it's the theory on boiling water, creating a gas, high velocity steam, which then turns that turbine, and we catalyze it up into electricity, just like a hydroelectric. So the other thing is, well, we're going to get the heat for free. Well, they're called volcanoes. Now, you could there's a lot of volcanic configurations in the earth. Yellowstone is a scary volcanic configuration, but this is where the internal boiling mass of the earth that's closer to that plasma ball squirts its way up out of sheer pressure and gets really close to the surface. And then, volcanoes actually have an eruption at the top. And that's not where you necessarily build these things. You build them next to extremely stable volcanic configurations in the soil. Well, the original theory was to build a U-shaped pipe, more like a trombone slider. Really long, does a U-turn and comes back the same general place that the first pipe started. You send the water down the pipe, and it gets heated by the natural core of the earth, and it comes back up boiling, turns the turbine, you're ready to rock and roll. Build it next to a lake, which are often the byproduct of a volcanic configuration of soil on top, and you've got an amazing source of electricity. Now, you would never build one for the entire world because of redundancy and problems with, maybe a volcano erupts and the plant's got to go into stasis for a little while. You would build them strategically around your country, and almost every major region in the world has got plenty of prime locations. They've been in video games forever. But they had to sabotage this design because they can't have a clean technology anywhere for anyone to be pissed off at the power bill. So imagine taking the trombone and cutting off the end where the turn happens. And so you're now using a single pipe technique, and you're allowing a bunch of super nasty stuff to come up the pipe. Still really hot. It's going to still turn a turbine, which is why they do have a few geothermal plants in the world, but they're built badly. And now they've told the public that they got, all these gases are really bad for metals. Obviously, it's super toxic to human beings. One of the natural chemicals that come out of volcanic pipelines is sulfuric acid. Remember, there's the shrimp that exist in some of the plumes that are around the big island of Hawaii? When you go down to a stable volcanic source of molten lava that's not about to erupt, they say be careful because if a gas bubble comes off, that it can kill you. It's volatile stuff, which is why Caltech closed the pipe. Yes, we might have to come up with some pretty interesting techniques of getting the pipe dug, surround it in concrete, stuff that can take the beating of all these chemicals, but we can do it, and we don't. So it's been sabotaged so that you think it's bad. You go research it and it's bad, bad, bad. We can fix those problems. There's a million ways to fix those problems. We are allowed to have what is bad, in terms of green solutions. I was just watching a Red Dwarf episode, and way late, I think in like season 13, they have this funny episode where the mining corporation, M-Corp, that owns the Red Dwarf ship that they're flying around in space in, gets bought by this other corporation. Maybe it was M-Corp that bought it. Yeah, GMC got bought by M-Corp, sorry. And it got to the point the main character, Lister, gets infiltrated by this, satellite updates to the software, and it starts generating all this fun stuff in the ship, all this logger, suitcases, and all this other stuff. But very quickly, Lister can no longer see his buddies. First he couldn't hear them, then he couldn't see them. And then he gets trapped in this room with this like hollow lady who's talking to him. She's like the sales person. And she starts charging him for oxygen, for words, for everything. For a glass of water, it costs 40 pounds for the glass and 40 pounds for the water. And he had to take 2 pain pills because she created pain in his body. Then he had to take these 2 pills. He had to pay for the pills, pay for the glass, pay for the water. And she was just going to punish him until he had no more credits, and then he would die. Every day he earned like 200 words with his friends or something. And they ended up getting out of the problem. What was interesting that Doug Naylor nailed in this particular episode was that that's how the world works. They want to create as much existence tax as humanly possible. That way you are never free. You buy some land in America, you got to pay taxes on it forever. If you don't pay taxes on the land, they take your house, they take your land. You never own it, but you bought it. Royal estate, real estate. There's all kinds of things like that, isn't there? And this show just took it and made it an absurdity so you could see it. And I wonder if anybody saw it. Really saw what he was putting in there. So I know this has got a lot of repeat from previous episodes, but again, I still got people unwilling to look at some of the fundamentals of the universe. They see bubbles in water, but they don't think they could possibly live on one. Same physics, as it is above, so too it is below. And if you're hanging on to firmament, flat earth, to honor God, and you're angry at, the secular people telling you it's a globe, God himself or herself has shown you the proof, probably where you are. And why that negates God, I don't know. It'd be really weird to get up to heaven and say, "Nah, man, I didn't live on a globe." And he's like, "Yeah, you did. It wasn't what you thought, but it wasn't what they said." And you sit there and argue with him constantly. He's shown it to you, man. The spin of all things in the universe produced the Fibonacci pattern that is everything. Everything that moves is alive. Everything that's stationary, well, not so much, right? There's not a cell in my body that's stationary. Nothing. And there's not a single object in the universe that isn't being refreshed second to second. There's a whole bunch more to the human condition. And I've tried to document things from, why you feel someone staring at you. It's because your body of bones is like an echo chamber of this substrate fabric. And anytime you have a stream of particles moving from your eyes, bouncing off that little concave dishes inside your skull at someone's back of somebody's head, and you were thinking, "Oh my God, look at that ass, look at that person, boy, I'd like to with that person." That information that you're thinking is a frequency of thought, and it's traveling on the substrate directly at the back of their head. And they feel your pervy thing, and they turn around and they're like, "What's going on?" Right? There's a whole bunch of greatness once you realize how this whole place works. And what's funny is the whole universe goes from infinitely confusing with all of these clowns and these wizards behind the curtain, getting you to believe the bullshit that's going on out front on stage. And as soon as you just go clip and you cut them off, it's just like this instantaneous. It is bizarre. You can instantly understand the entire universe except perhaps you won't know if there's a container or not. But it's sort of irrelevant from your perspective. It really is. And even if this is a matrix, and you say, I don't need to believe anything you're saying because it's a matrix. Well, yeah, maybe I can see your point. But I guarantee you, when any of your favorite massive multiplayer online games structure reality inside the memory of a computer, which are flat, linear, XY, Cartesian coordinate memory systems, they're not three-dimensional yet, right? It's just a bed of electrons that constantly store what's going on. Inside the protocol of this square memory, your flat Earth memory, are paradigms of three-dimensional space. X, Y, Z, T. Where are you in time? If you're running in front of your buddy on a video game, it's telling me what X, Y, Z you're at, but it's also telling me your yaw, pitch, and way, and it's telling me what frame of animation your wizard is at, your frame of animation your tank is at, whether you're an orc, whether or not you're an elf. Inside that flat domain is a three-dimensional construct. So even if you think we're inside of a computer, the programmers have programmed the paradigm of three-dimensional space with the passage of time, which is nothing more than state changes that you're allowed to memorize. And your memory is probably going out to some other bed of electrons somewhere, bed of memory somewhere, where you can recall your childhood. If you're going to tell me you believe something different than what I'm saying because you're open-minded, realize that's sort of a catch-22 paradox, because I'm giving you a different thing than what official science is giving you, something the elders of electricity figured out a long time ago and proved. So give yourself an opportunity to consider what actually explains observable reality 1,000%. Nothing is unaccounted for. Even expanding Earth is completely explained by these theories. The ball that is the sun is expanding. The ball that is the moon is expanding. The ball that is Earth is expanding. You can see it on the crust of the Earth, man. Get rid of all the oceans, all the continents, seamlessly, without subduction, which means a continent going underneath another one. It all comes together in a beautiful little soccer ball pattern. We used to be a planet without oceans. German scientists proved that the ocean, if reversed for the algorithm of salt accumulation over year, is only about 65 million years old. Well, when were dinosaurs supposed to be here, right? The fake paleontology. Go see my episode on dinosaurs if you believe that stuff was real. I used to believe it was real. Now I don't think it was real at all. Keep an open mind. Try it out. Try it on like a shirt. Really try it on. I tried on Flat Earth. I tried it on. I spent at least 2 months walking this planet, believing that, okay, yeah, man, this makes sense. And then I thought about my expanding Earth. Wait a minute. And then all this ethereal stuff clicked, and I was like, holy crap. I could have saved myself 15 years of research trying to come up with a unified theory. It was all in front of my face. In a way. It wasn't allowed in any of my textbooks. I mean, again, I probably have given away at least 200 books on this subject. Wasn't any of those books, because it's not allowed to be taught. Yet the algorithms still work, right? But it ain't angel power. It's something else, So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you haven't been to the Deep Thoughts Radio website, please go. I'm having a bit of a problem as of the 1st of July that one of the category links is not working. I'm trying to figure out what the hell that is. I had to fix the database once, and I think it's got a little bit of a flaw. I'm studying WordPress databases to see if I can't fix it. So once I figure that out, we'll get that all fixed up. Could be the template, but I don't think it is. But anyhow, everything's up there. Video, audio, social media, only remastered season 1, a store, and of course to all the Patreons and PayPal people to make it happen. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you on the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.